Join the conversation.
Join the conversation.
You're with Kate Talk.
Now it's time for legal talk, and seeing as most lawyers worth their salt are still on holiday today, we thought we would replay one of last year's most impactful segments because it is a subject which continues to be of crucial relevance and importance. It was in February last year that we spoke to Nicolene Schoeman-Louw, Managing Director of Schoeman-Louw Incorporated, who had flagged with us her concern at the increasing number of cybercrimes cases that were crossing her desk. And in particular, she noted how really concerned she was about the rise in cyberbullying. So we thought it was worth taking a listen to her input again, talking to us about what the crime looks like, how it impacts victims, and what the legal consequences can be, what can be done to put a stop to it. Is there a technical legal definition of cyberbullying by now? I know there's been a lot of movement in terms of regulations in recent years to deal with the online space, but have they actually defined it?
The problem is, so firstly, to answer the question, no. There is no definition of cyberbullying or of cybercrime for that matter.
Really?
Even in our new Cybercrimes Act, we say new, but in actual fact, it's almost 3 years old in terms of enactment, not of becoming effective. And that's a major problem. So many people engaging in cyberbullying, in other words, the instigators of it, as well as the victims, fail to realize that this is actually happening to them. And that's a major issue.
So in the absence of a definition, they don't even recognize that what they're doing is a crime, or that what is happening to them is a crime that they can take action against. And Nicolene, important to say, it's not only happening to children. We know we've had lots of conversations about the devastating impact it can have on children, but adults are subject to cyberbullying as well, aren't they?
Absolutely, and I think we are seeing it manifesting in the workplace particularly, and that's of grave concern. I think we hear the word bullying, and automatically as people, we think, oh, that's the thing that happens when you are young and you're at school. And when we were at school, of course, it didn't take an electronic form. Other things were happening, but the word bullying is very much associated to a school setting. In the workplace, though, we see it happening where you would typically maybe see victimization or some illegal act, or even actually what makes this extremely tricky is that often the act of the cyberbullying in our workplaces, it really transfers into various other pieces of law that actually become transgressed. So we are no longer looking solely at who created the post or the media, which is being distributed. So the first part of our law was very focused on, did you create something that is offensive? And as the creator, if we could get to you, then there was a crime that we could prosecute, or there was an act to do something about. But later, as we've seen our law evolve to deal with it, we have no, it's not about the creator anymore solely. It's also about those of us forwarding these things on, and often blindly just forwarding something and not really thinking about it. Similarly, fake news is equally offensive, but again, that's obviously more into the fraud and the cyber crime, not really necessarily bullying.
Nicolene, maybe it would be helpful to share a couple of examples with us of the kinds of cyberbullying that have crossed your desk. Do you want to share some examples?
Yes. So firstly, I think we need to just have one principle founded firmly. The fact that we are talking about cybercrime or cyberbullying, I think for many of us who are a little older, we've lived in a time where this wasn't possible due to technological advancement not taking place yet. For us, it's important not to lose sight that because we are adding the word cyber in front of it, the actual action in itself is just being disseminated in a different way. But the principle remains the same. And we have a very well-established body of law dealing with intercepting messages unlawfully. We have Poppy dealing with leaking personal information. And of course, we've had our Prevention Against Harassment Act, the act that gives us the ability to go to court and what the Americans call a restraining order to get one of those if we feel we are being harassed by a person. And of course, very helpful in a domestic violence setting.
Yeah.
So with that being said, we are looking at things, for example, of recording a video of someone doing something which may have been funny and may have been done in a closed setting, but now we are distributing it on social media, almost mocking the person.
Yeah.
Right? So it can be as innocent as someone is playing a bit of fool in our office. We make a video and someone goes and they post it online, and it becomes something that is a reputational damage.
Yeah.
Of course, harassment, victimization, and it can even be, unfortunately, indecent photographs or media taken without that person's knowledge or permission, and then distributing that within the workplace. And that's really the most terrible manifestations of this that we've seen, the so-called revenge porn. Although it wouldn't quite be that because it's not consensual, the photographs were not taken with consent.
Yeah.
So it's even worse. And that, of course, becomes an extremely traumatizing situation with far-reaching implications.
That's such an important thing you've just said, Nicolene, because we know often, I remember from school days, often if somebody reported behavior that could have been construed as bullying, you were told, just ignore it, they'll stop, they'll go away. It's not as simple as that, Nicolene, and this kind of crime might seem fairly innocuous, but the impact on victims' lives can be really, really massive, can't it?
Of course. And on the topic of the indecent photographs, which I think there's a major rise, particularly in a workplace setting, is that often let's say the photograph or the media was taken consensually by a ex-partner, who then proceeds to forward it on to your boss or your colleague, and they then think it's a huge joke, and this gets disseminated throughout the workplace. The victim feels a sense of shame immediately because, oh goodness, I brought this over myself because I allowed this person to take this photograph. Yeah. And because of that, it doesn't get reported. And we often see the level of damage that ensues from that is actually unquantifiable. So if something like that is happening, or if it really crosses that line, we need to take action. And if we're not getting the recourse within the environment where we're supposed to report and escalate in our workplaces internally, we need to seek outside advice, and we need to report this.
What sort of recourse is available, Nicolene? And what sort of penalties are in place for somebody found guilty of committing an act of cyberbullying?
Well, if it is persistent, in other words, and often we see that a act of cyberbullying is really a bunch of small little acts or little events that culminate into something terrible that happens, right? That indecent photograph, for example, or video. So it doesn't start with that in most cases. It really builds up to that, if I could put it that way. And if that is the case, there could be grounds for you to get a protection order against this person who was sending the information around. So there could be a case for harassment and an interdict that you could get it to stop now. And of course, you could report it to SAPS, the police service, as a crime in the normal course. And if there is a pecuniary loss, and that could be monetary, that you maybe need to expend to get treatment or counseling, then, of course, you could also claim damages in the civil sense. So we really, I think, need to be very mindful of what we forward, because, of course, the net is now much wider than just the creator of whichever material. It's about who passed it on. We need to be very, very vigilant what we pass on and what we share and what we forward. We need to be extremely mindful and really look at how it impacts this person who is predominantly being focused upon. So there could be criminal sanctions, which could lead to a fine or jail time. And there could be civil claims or restraining orders, as the Americans call it, an interdict in South African legal language.
Just for those late to the conversation, my guest is Nicolene Schoeman-Louw, who is an attorney and the MD of Schoeman-Louw Incorporated, talking to us about the crime of cyberbullying. Couple of comments and questions coming in. Nicolene, somebody saying, I recently moved to a small area and joined one of the community groups where there seems to be what appear to me racist memes being shared. Would this be regarded as bullying, as I find it offensive?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And then the second one asking whether catfishing would be considered a cybercrime.
Yes, so interestingly, if we look back in the history.
But yeah, we seem to have just lost Nicolene's phone line there. I'm going to put it back to my producer and just ask if they can move around a little bit to try and get a clearer signal. In the meantime, there is a voice note that's come through that maybe we can listen to while we try to get Nicolene back on a clearer line. 0214460567 is the number to dial if you'd like to ask a question or make a comment. You're also welcome to tweet us at Cape Talk or send a voice note to 0725671567.
Hi, Pippa. I actually just listened to a podcast this weekend. It was an episode on scamfluencers, and the podcast is about various scam artists and such. But what was quite interesting about this one in particular was how the impact of a cyberbullying incident had affected this woman and had essentially started the chain reaction of her becoming a con artist.
Wow.
And defrauding and credit card fraud. And it was just really interesting to listen through that story and just to see how deep an incident of cyberbullying can impact a person's life and how long that can follow someone. Can't remember which episode number it was, but it was on a podcast called Scamfluencers.
Thank you very much for the tip-off about that podcast. And yeah, making the point there, Nicolene, about the long-reaching impact, that this is not just to be dismissed as, oh, well, ignore the bully and they'll go away. There are potentially far-reaching consequences for people's mental health as well as their position in the workplace, for example. So you've mentioned the opportunity to take civil action. You've mentioned the opportunity to lodge a criminal complaint. Before we run out of time, Nicolene, are SAPs taking this kind of complaint seriously? If I was to walk into my local police station and say, I'm being harassed on WhatsApp, or I feel like I'm being targeted by cyberbullying, should I expect that they would be willing to open a case for me?
Yes, I think we should expect that and we should insist upon that. But the reality is that the Cybercrimes Act is still fairly new, and I do not, in my personal view, think that SAPS has had the required training to really ascertain what would constitute a cybercrime or bullying and harassment beyond the traditional framework. So the fraud and the scams, I think those are easier crimes to prosecute. But anything to do with harassment, even if we look at the Protection Against Harassment Act that has been around for more than 10 years, we are still grappling to distinguish what constitutes harassment and what does not. And similarly, bullying is very subjective. Some people would experience something to be more offensive than others. We have different states of mental health and awareness. So I think although we have structures in place, it's still very new and we should be mindful. And if you feel you're not getting the attention you deserve there, go and see an attorney to assist you with other avenues of recourse.
Thank you again to Nicolene Schoeman-Louw, attorney and managing director of Schoeman-Louw Incorporated. That was a pre-record, or a replay rather, of an interview conducted during the course of last year. And I'm sure Nicolene will be back with us with fresh topics to discuss during Legal Talk in 2024. For now, it's 2:30. Wesley Peterson is standing by at the Eyewitness News Desk with the latest.